Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos, and today we have class tuning coming in September 17th. So this is the last class tuning before the Race World First, and probably the last class tuning that we'll see for the next several weeks. Usually they don't like to do class tuning during the actual first few weeks of Mythic, but this is announced just today, just now. So during scheduled weekly maintenance on September 17th, we will adjust classes that have been over and underperforming in the first few weeks of the War Within Season 1. So starting off with Death Knight, we actually have some buffs here to Sand Lane. Vampiric Strike's trigger chance is going up by a lot. Frenzied Bloodthirst also going up by a little bit. Visceral Strength a little bit as well. And then there are some blood-specific buffs for Sand Lane. Vampiric Strike damage going up and Infliction of Sorrow also doing more damage there. So I would say this is probably not super impactful. Nobody was really playing Sand Lane. I think it probably still won't. Maybe it'll be interesting now, but probably not a super impactful change for who's going to play what, because I think Deathbringer is still going to outperform for Blood, and I suspect you're probably still playing the other one for... actually, maybe you could play this for Unholy now. I'm not sure. That would be something I need to look at more. Demon Hunter. So there's a small buff here to Demon Hunter that's in the form of a bug fix, where I-Beam was doing less damage beyond one target rather than 5. So that'll help out Havoc's AoE on any number of targets above 2, basically. Also fix an issue that was preventing it from benefiting from isolated prey and chaotic disposition. So yeah, I actually don't know how much of a percent buff this is to Havoc, but it's actually probably not a tiny one. There's probably a couple percent from these bug fixes. Balanced Druid. So Balanced Druid was by far the worst spec I'd ever seen in my life up until this point, and it may still be after this. We've got all ability damage going up by 6%, which I don't think necessarily comes close to like closing that chasm. Star Surge is going up by 16%, and Starfall by 20%, not applied to PvP combat. So those are some large numbers to some large abilities. Although the problem is those abilities were doing so little damage before this point that even though it's a large percent increase to them, they might still be not doing very much damage. Eluna's Chosen is also getting a buff where Lunar Calling is going to increase primary target damage on Starfire by even more as well. So is this enough to make Balanced Druid playable in high-end content? Maybe. There's a large set of buffs. Feral's also getting some buffs here, so we're starting off with a nerf in the form of reverting Blood Talons and Lion Strength to no longer also Rampant Ferocity, in response to feedback that this change reduced the value of maintaining RIP and complicated using Blood Talons and AoE. We are reverting this change. This is functionally a nerf as well. But the rest of these are buffs. All ability damage increased by 3%, RIP 6%, Bite 3%, Feral Frenzy 10%, and Druid of the Claw specifically, Ravage is going up by 3% as well. So maybe also makes this the best way to bring Mark of the Wild. I'm not sure. That's kind of the story of this tier has been, at least from the perspective of thinking about building a comp, is what is the least bad Druid spec. And there's another one getting buffed as well, Resto Druid. All healing up by 8%. And then Wrath, Starfire, and Star Surge are getting more damage. This isn't, I think, surgically buffing Resto Druid's damage. A lot of healers are getting damage buffs in this set of patch notes, so I would say that's something to factor in before you think too much about like they're buffing Resto damage specifically. It seems like they're kind of just buffing all healers damage. But yeah, all healing increased by 8%. That's a large number. Resto Druid's healing was quite bad, so that will be making them also a much more exciting candidate for Mark of the Wild. As it stands right now, I think these buffs probably make all 4 Druid specs interesting options for being your Mark of the Wild in a 20-player Mythic, high-end situation. I still don't think you'd probably want more than one. All of these specs were pretty far behind. Evoker, so Disintegrate is doing more damage. That's going to apply for Prez and Dev. And then Dev is also getting an Eternity Surge damage increase. Dev actually was already doing a reasonable amount of damage in the right situation, so maybe didn't need too much more damage to be quite good, but yeah, this will definitely be something to look at as well. I think you're probably still not going to see very many people using it. It's just a spec that doesn't really do anything besides damage, and there are a lot of specs that do a lot of damage right now, some of which are getting nerfed further down in this post, but I don't think by enough. Speaking of which, Mage. Living Bomb has a new visual thing, whatever. Arcane is getting some Sun Fury specific nerfs. First of all, I'm glad they're nerfing on Sun Fury in particular, because the gap between Sun Fury and Spellslinger for Arcane was massive, and I think Spellslinger, if anything, could get some buffs, and it would be good, because that's a pretty exciting hero talent tree that is completely unusable with the current tuning. So Meteorite's damage is going down by 15%, and Burden of Power is being nerfed to 20 and 20 for Blast and Barrage rather than 30 and 30. I'm not a mage scientist, but my gut reaction here is that Arcane will still be great. This seems like probably a light tap to bring them from being one of the top few specs to still being one of the top few specs. Fire's also getting buffed here. Fire, fun rotation, very bad damage as it stood going into this. So all abilities going up by 6%, Living Bomb 25% as well. Living Bomb is one that they've had a really hard time navigating that during the beta cycle, how much damage it should do, because they added a bunch of talents that key into it and make Living Bomb a thing that basically as they tune that, they're going to tune a lot of those talents for fire inadvertently. So I suspect that Living Bomb is going to kind of join Psychic Link as one of these buttons that just gets tuned up and down every single patch. Monk, Mistweaver, all healing is going up by 3%, and then Tiger Palm and Rising Sun Kick are going up by 15% in terms of damage as well. Mistweaver, I think, maybe could have used a little bit more of a healing amp. The thing is, this is a healing spec that it doesn't really do much besides just healing, right? You're not providing any DRs to the raid. Revival, actually not bad. Restore potentially as well in some of the fights this tier, but this is one of the healing specs that I think is among the least likely to get used by a lot of guilds this time around. So I think giving it some more HPS is good. Maybe even more than 3% would have been better, but probably still a good patch note overall. Better than nothing for sure. Windwalker is getting a slight nerf here to Darting Hurricane. The passive trigger rate is being reduced by 50%, and it's going to reduce the GCD by 0.25 rather than 0.5 seconds. I'm not a Windwalker expert, but this doesn't strike me as a huge deal either. Holy Paladin is getting some nerfs to their healing, 6% reduced healing. Judgment is going up, though. Crusader Strike's going up. Hammer of Wrath going up. Avenging Crusader is being nerfed, the healing transfer amount. And Holy Prism's single target damage and AoE damage are both going up the single target by a lot. It's going to be... I think this is fair. Holy Paladin has two really good strengths this tier. One was just the raw HPS. The other is the mana. Mana this tier, I think Holy Paladin looks really strong at, and that has been untouched here. So I suspect one Holy Paladin is still going to be a mainstay for most Mythic rating teams. Ret Pally is getting a small nerf just to Herald of the Sun Dawnlight damage, which I thought they always played Templar anyways, so I'm not sure why Herald Ret is getting nerfed, but Ret is a spec that has surprised me, because if you look at the Wowhead tier list that I put together, I had them in the lowest tier with the Moonkins and the Destralocks, and they certainly didn't belong there. There'll be some updates coming to that probably in the next 24 hours, so... But yeah, this spec has been performing definitely better than that so far over the first couple of days. But yeah, I'm surprised to see Herald of the Sun getting nerfed. Maybe people are playing this and I just haven't noticed. Shadow Priest is getting all damage going up by 6%. This was another spec that was actually, fighting the Moonkins and the Og Evokers and the tanks at the bottom of the damage meters. All damage going up is nice, but Psychic Link is getting nerfed here to 25 from 30%, which, that reads like a 5% nerf, right? But it's actually a big nerf to Psychic Link, right? This is like 17% less damage on Psychic Link, which is a lot of their AoE, their multi-target here, which was already not insane or anything. So I actually think this is a net nerf to Shadow in the situations where you'd be most thinking about using them. And that spec did not need a net nerf in those situations. Like this spec, even if it just got the all damage increased by 6% without this Psychic Link line, I don't think people would use it for any Mythic stuff. And with this line, I think that you're taking the biggest potential strength of the spec and taking it away. So I think this is probably my candidate for least favorite line of text in these patch notes. Outlaw Rogue, all ability damage reduced by 4%, Dispatch 10%, and Melee 8%. So Outlaw is actually doing a lot of damage in these early days. If you look at the Warcraft log statistics, they're doing really high damage, especially as you get into the high percentiles. But their set bonus was really weak, and to compensate for some of these nerfs, I don't think this is going to fully compensate, but they're moving some power into the set bonus at least. So this is probably a net nerf here, but overall, I think it is healthy to have the set bonus be a little bit stronger than it otherwise was going to be. The 2 set now grants listed abilities a 35% to deal 30% increased damage, was 20% for 15 damage. So this is like 4 times more damage roughly on the 2 set. So it's still not going to be great. Excuse me, but it's going to be at least more than a percent of your overall, which is nice. And then the 4 set says now between the eyes increased to 15 per stack up to 4 stacks, was 6% for 3 stacks, so a huge buff to the 4 piece as well. So yeah, I think that is a healthier way to set up the spec. This is still probably overall net nerf, though, to Outlaw, which is probably fair. That spec was doing a lot of damage. Enhance, all ability damage increased by 4%. The Witch Doctor's Ancestry now reduces the cooldown of Feral Spirit by 1 second when you gain Maelstrom Weapon from 2. So this is a net nerf, a medium-sized nerf to Enhance. It also reduces the effectiveness of their 4-set, which was among the most massive 4-sets in the game too. But they're compensating with this little 4% buff. I think Enhance is still going to be just fine, and they're a little bit less reliant on getting to that 4-piece. Their 4-piece is still going to be great as well. The 2-set is also being buffed here to 10% from 6, which I think they nerfed last week from 10 to 6, and now 6 to 10 back. The 2-set was never the problem. The 4-set is what is OP for Enhance. So interesting there. Resto is just getting some damage increases to Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, and Chain Lightning. Demo Lock, Demon Bolt damage is going up. Axe of the Area Druid and Doomguard is going up by 45%, and Felguard damage is going up by 15%. So some pretty big buffs to Demo. Demo actually was near the bottom of a lot of graphs over on Warcraft logs. Maybe a little bit misleading because on Heroic, especially in the first couple days, Demo maybe is going to underperform, but still, I think this is probably a good target for some buffs. Destro, definitely a good spec to be buffing. All ability damage going up by 6%. Dimensional Rift and Channel Demon Fire also getting 40% on top of that. So large numbers for spells that are never really a huge percentage of your damage, so overall, probably not that much more of a buff than just this all ability damage increase, but still, 6% is pretty large for an aura buff, especially mid-patch rather than in beta. Warrior, we have some Colossus buffs. So the situation with Warrior is that Arms and Fury are super OP, and the way by which they're super OP is largely through the Slayer hero talent tree. So buffing Colossus and Mountain Thane, which they're doing here, I think is a great idea. Mountain Muscle and Scars increases damage by 5 rather than 4%, so pretty small buff there. Damage dealt by Demolishes 2 initial strikes increased by 20% as well. Also a good buff there. Makes it actually pretty interesting for Prot as well. Mountain Thane, though, is also getting some increase to Thunder Blast, Lightning Strikes, and Ground Current damage, 6% there. So this is Prot Warrior buffs. Prot Warrior just straight up buffed here, whichever hero talent tree you're using. Arms is getting a Blade Storm nerf of 10%. Fury is getting that on top of an Odin's Fury nerf of 15%. But Mountain Thane is getting buffed a little bit. It's not a big deal. I think you're still playing Slayer in like all cases for Fury. These nerfs are definitely quite large nerfs for... in a vacuum, you'd think, oh, Blade Storm is like a lot of their damage, a lot of their strength. I mean, the specs are still phenomenal. This Fury is still going to be, I think, likely one of the top 3 specs to be playing for Mythic progression this time around. One of the most likely to get stacked to be top damage on Queen Anne's Direct when we look at the damage meters at the end of that fight. So... yeah, overall, I'd say then there's some PvP changes. We don't care about these. Read those on your own time or find some PvP content creator if you want. But overall, I think a good set of changes here. Definitely, they've buffed a lot of the stuff that I thought needed to get buffed. They nerfed a few of the things that, like Warrior, Mage, obvious nerf targets. I'm not happy with the Shadow Priest Psychic Link change here. I think that's a blunder to not pair with at least some more increases in the rest of the kit. Yeah. All in all, good. I like the Sand Lane buffs to DK as well. I think there are a lot of hero talent trees that are basically unused right now, and it would be good if more of them got this sort of treatment. I think this is really good. That's it, though. That's it for these patch notes. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.